Hey, Megan, welcome to Work Life. I'm so glad you could be here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
This is exciting. We connected a while back
Mhm.
because you had produced a state of the podcasting report,
Mhm.
and I really want to get into that in a little bit. But I'd love just to sort of start out the show. You know, we always start out talking about your work life and the kinds
Mhm.
of things that you're doing in your work life and how you got to where you are. You're a co-founder of One
Mhm.
Stone Creative. So, what are some highlights? How did you get from, where you started to being a co-founder of a creative agency?
Craigslist. Uh,
Craigslist. Well, that makes it simple.
yeah. So after I graduated high school, went to business school was my first step after that. Did
Okay.
terribly, dropped out, became a baker. So I made pies for a living for a little while.
Oh, that's
Uh,
interesting. You are
yeah,
not the
and
first person I've had on this show that had a cooking career prior to a marketing career. That's interesting.
food service prepares you for a lot in the world.
Yeah.
It's really, really transferable. But after doing that for a couple of years, I decided I would like to get back into kind of more of a desk job type situation, which I guess many people feel when you work on your feet. Hey, desk job would be great. So, like any other 22-year-old, I went to Craigslist and saw who in the area was hiring.
Yeah.
Found an ad for a marketer's assistant,
Okay.
applied, and then got hired at a very early stage startup in the marketing education space. And I got to grow with that company and really start to learn the strategy, the theory. It was a tremendous education and
I
worked
bet.
there for 6 years.
Okay.
Learned all about online business, helping other people grow online businesses. Eventually kind of left the company and was like, well, the thing I know how to do now is bake pies and run online businesses. So I guess I'll run an online business.
That's right.
Uh, yeah, and then a woman who I'd worked with at that company reached out just one day out of the blue, a year or two after I'd left, and said, "Hey, do you want to start a business together?" And I said, "With you, absolutely. I'd love to. What should we do?" And her background was in commercial radio production. Mine was in marketing strategy at that point. So we just decided, business podcasts. That's where our skills really mesh. We can do that, and we'll have a lot of fun. And I've been doing that ever since.
It's so interesting, when I hear people's career journeys, and, I can speak to my own as well,
Mhm.
but doors just sort of open along the way. And when you look back in the rearview mirror and you sort of see how you got to where you are today, I'm sure when you were baking pies, you didn't necessarily think that you would end up, in a podcast, production creative agency, right?
Yeah, I never would have guessed podcasting. I mean, I like listening to podcasts, but I never, sat down and said like, this is what I'm going to do for my career: is get really invested in, nonfiction audio content.
Yes.
But it's great.
Yeah. And, podcasting just seems like in this last year to kind of caught fire. You have,
Mhm.
big players like Spotify really getting in,
Yep.
paying for some high priced talent with Joe Rogan. And now, there's all these rumblings of what Apple might be planning, maybe with a premium subscription
Yeah.
service. You've got Amazon getting into it a little bit
Mhm.
with maybe some things around Audible. So this is a hot time to be in podcasting. Have you seen that reflected in your own business?
Definitely, very,
Yeah.
very much so. I mean, for the last couple of years, the company's going into its fourth year now, and there's a huge difference in just the awareness that people have about podcasting, specifically that business owners or marketing directors have about podcasting as a way to connect with the audiences that they already have or that they want to have. And just all these big companies getting involved, like Spotify just bought one of the major hosts, which has been really
Yes.
interesting. So much investment is happening in the industry that it's being legitimized. So all of the people who for years have been saying, "Hey, podcasting is this great medium," now kind of the rest of the world is being like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I guess we should have started a podcast 2 years ago, but the next best time is now." So it's been a really exciting year.
Well, and it's such an affordable medium to get
Hmm.
involved with, right? You buy one of these fancy mics, you get a little bit of a setup. I mean, obviously, we're doing some things on YouTube here,
Yeah.
but it really doesn't cost a lot. And even the hosting platforms, they can be 8,
Mhm.
10, $12 a month to host your podcast.
Yep.
It's not a huge investment, yet you can build a worldwide audience with your voice uh, in a matter of months.
You can, and the worldwide aspect is so fun. In particular, I we look at the stats, for the podcast that we produce at One Stone, and every now and then you'll see this huge spike across the world. And I get to email someone, and she's like, "Hey, by the way, you're huge in Norway."
Right.
no reason why, just someone picked
You're
it up
thinking
and
our way.
shared it with their friends, and that's how most podcast sharing happens, which is really interesting. There's no really great audio based search yet, so searching
Right.
for a podcast is challenging. Most of it's coming from referrals and from word of mouth and from social media and this personal transfer of, hey, you've got to listen to this, you've got to listen to this, you've got to listen to this. It's really still organic despite all of the interest that's in it from the big companies right now.
Yeah, there was a service I tried the other day. I believe it was called Listen Notes or something. It
Mhm.
was a search engine to try to help you discover more podcasts more
Yep.
easily. And I know Google is doing things. I know with my own podcast, I do a transcript and save that with the file.
Good.
So hopefully that gives Google some additional things to search
Mhm.
on. But you're right, it's not great right now, is it?
No, and I think that's going to be the next really big thing that changes. There's been some really interesting companies doing some work in actual audio search, so AI-based searching through audio content. And I think that's once someone really hits on the right formula for that, it's going to be kind of a game changer in terms of podcast discovery.
So what's your own show about that you do there at One Stone?
I don't have one.
Oh, you don't have one. So that's
I
interesting.
do
So you
not
just
have a
produce it for,
podcast.
yeah. Are you thinking of doing it?
It's on the list of things that, as a podcast production company, it would probably make sense for us to do.
Sure.
But the big hesitation there for me is that I'm a behind the scenes person. So is my business partner. We don't. I love coming onto shows like this and having conversations. I think it's great. But being the host, being the center of that kind of a product, I can do it, but it brings me no joy
Yeah, I get it.
compared to like really helping someone structure their show and
Mm.
come up with ideas for someone else and produce that and make it excellent. That's a lot more exciting to me. So it's on the list of things that we probably really should do, but haven't quite yet, just because things are still going well. We're still achieving growth and don't seem to lack too much credibility for not having our own show yet. So
That's really interesting to me because about 2 weeks ago, a Clubhouse came on my radar, and
Mhm.
I had not heard anything about it prior to that. We're recording this in late January, and I just hadn't heard anything. And now, literally every day, somebody has said something to me about Clubhouse, and I've been playing around with it. I got on it
Mhm.
a few times. And for those people who don't know what Clubhouse is, it's sort of like an audio chat room, for maybe lack of a better description. It's all live, it's not recorded. You join, you raise your hand if you want to speak, but it's all arranged by topics. And this seems like an interesting way for people, maybe such as yourself, who don't want to do their own regular show, but still gain some authority out there
Mhm.
and connection with other people, other like minded people. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's really interesting. I wish I could check it out for myself, but as far as I know, it's still Apple only, so it's on
It is.
iOS and not
It's
Android.
just that's right. It's only
Yeah,
iOS
so
right
I'm
now.
an Android user, so as soon as I can check it out, I will. Just kind of having not seen it and I'm only imagining it, it's in my head appearing as rather cacophonous. And it's just
Mm.
like, oh, that sounds anxiety inducing. But again, like you, I've been hearing so many interesting things about it that I'd love to at least check it out. And there are it reminds me just kind of on the surface like Anchor. So kind of that Anchor's the really easy, free to use on your phone podcasting host, and it makes it super simple for someone to just go on, start a show, and make it live. It kind of sounds like that, but without the permanence of actual podcast hosting.
That's right. It's not the permanence. And I
Mhm.
think it's just designed to encourage a lot of conversation
Mhm.
and dialogue about things. The crazy thing about it is you get a notification if one of the people that you follow starts up a live stream,
Oh,
and you
cool.
can join into that, and then you can raise your hand if you want to talk, and if they pick you, then they open up the microphone to you and you can add it. So it's really kind of interesting, and I've been surprised at some of the big players that are on there right now.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting way to do it. The downside is it sort of happens very quickly, right? You get a
Mhm.
notification, and if you're available, you can join in. If you're not, you can't. Some of them are scheduled in advance, but a lot of them are sort of ad hoc. So, when you did your state of the podcasting
Mhm.
report, what were some of the insights that you really uncovered about the state of the industry?
Yeah, that was super fascinating. So the project it came about just because people ask me all the time, "Hey, what's the best way to do this? What do all the other shows do for this?" And I didn't have a solid answer for them because there wasn't a business podcast specific report of like what the stats are. So we did the research, and some of the most interesting things were how much people are using YouTube, how short show notes are, and how frequently people are posting, like
Oh,
releasing
interesting.
new episodes. Those were kind of the three most surprising things to me. Um, And the frequency of release, I think, was the big one, because over 80% were releasing more than once a week. And that's a huge amount of work, as a podcast producer, like how much work is involved in getting out an episode.
Yes.
So that was shocking. And then the other really it was my team who did the research, and I got back that, most, like so many show notes, but 50% were, a paragraph or less, even a sentence. I was like, that can't possibly be right. I went and hand checked them to see, could this be true? It was true. People are really just minimizing the show notes that they're including with their podcasts, which makes me think that it's, kind of contrary to how you're doing it, using it to tell Google, hey, this is what my show's about, people should find it. They're really focusing on the audio and maybe other kinds of promotion for it. So that was another really interesting insight.
That is interesting, because I know for my own podcast, the Virtual CMO, what I do is I don't do a lot. There's a description of the author, gives them a little bit of background, but it's got links not only to my social media handles, but to my guest social media handles, any specific items that they talked about in the show. Maybe they were talking about a book or whatnot. We put links in there for that. So they're not big, but then I also do a web page that has a much more expansive review of the podcast episode. And you're right. I've seen some people hardly do anything, and it makes me wonder, they're really not giving the search engines a lot to find.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, like, my kind of theory about that is that a lot of the best shows are created by people who are already famous. And the nice thing about being already really popular is that you don't have to put a lot of effort into providing the search tools and the experience, because people are going to consume your content no matter what form it's in. I'd say like a smaller show or a new show can't necessarily get away with that in the same way. So it's one thing when Joe Rogan does something. It's another thing when you or I were to do something. So kind of the standards and the expectations and the needs that we need to fulfill to reach our goals are going to be really different.
It's interesting you say that too, because I do think a lot of these platforms push these big content creators, and it almost creates this snowball effect where they just keep getting bigger and bigger because they're so visible. I know that for some of our live streaming that we do for the podcast, we've been trying to get on LinkedIn for a long time, but the approval process is arduous and the people that are on there are some people who have huge audiences already. So I understand from LinkedIn's perspective why they want that. But at the same time, if you're always focusing on the same people, you're not giving other content creators the same opportunity. So it's interesting that you found some of that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cool, like what you were talking about Clubhouse, is because that's such a new frontier. I mean, that could be really an opportunity to level the playing field, because no one's got the huge audience there yet. So anyone who's going to be innovating on how they use it could really see benefits in other areas of their business.
It's true. And one thing that I would add to that is just to say that some of these big players are already on it. So it's clear that they're trying to, stake that early claim to some of the popularity that might be coming because it's a new product. But it's certainly gotten their attention. It's not like those people aren't paying any attention to this new product, even though it's only in beta. So that's really interesting. So your company primarily helps other companies or other individuals create their podcast, produce their podcast, and you also do some work on online courses. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we help usually small business owners, like professional services providers, small companies who need needs a podcast, who want a podcast as another marketing channel for their business, usually in conjunction with other things that they've got going on marketing wise. And in very rare cases, we will make an online course when there's a good business case for it. So, I mean, I love making online courses. We did a lot of that, in my career. That's been a lot of my background, but usually there's not a good business case for them. It's a lot easier to teach how to make an online course than it is to make money from an online course. So if we're really convinced that there's going to be a great return on it, then I love making online courses.
And so the podcast production is both the technical side, just doing the editing, but creating the social media posts, getting it uploaded, all those kind of things. It's sort of a one-stop shop. Somebody records it, sends you a file, and then you take it from there. Is that kind of how it works?
That's precisely it. And we start everything with, really strong discussion around what are the goals for the show? Are you doing this for networking? Is it for, thought leadership? Is it to engage an audience you already have? And so we structure a show that's going to most easily meet those goals. And then just as you say, people talk, send us audio, we produce, we host, we send socials, and kind of take care of all that for them.
That's great. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about the personal side of things. So I know in your biography, you talked about having all of these plants in your house. Are you a real green thumb? Is that a hobby of yours?
It is very much a hobby of mine, and
Yeah.
my partner as well. So it's one of the things we really enjoy doing together is taking care of houseplants. We have a beautiful south-facing corner lot
Okay.
at our house, and so we have 16 beds for vegetables that we grow every year, and it's just I absolutely love gardening.
We should tell the audience you're up in Canada, correct?
Yes, up in Canada. So for 6 months of the year, I love gardening. Would
Yeah.
be more accurate to say.
Everything else has to be indoors for the rest of it, right?
That's why we have so many houseplants.
Yeah. So what's the key? I mean, whenever I have a house plant, its lifespan is very limited. I can't seem to keep, it's funny because I've had plants. I live down in Orlando, Florida, and you can literally, throw a plant in a bed and it'll be dying inside the house, and the next year it'll be 2 stories tall outside.
Mhm.
What is it that makes it so hard to grow a plant inside?
Uh, well, I mean, most indoor house plants are tropical,
Mm,
and a climate controlled house like I imagine you have in Florida probably have air conditioning.
yeah.
It's not in nature the way the
Mm,
plant wants to be when it grows. It wasn't really designed to be inside. So to help an indoor house plant grow, you have to really pay attention to it and listen to it almost. If it's a little wilty, if its leaves are curling a little bit, it means maybe it's deficient in a nutrient, or it needs more sun, or it hates that draft.
yeah.
Some plants are a lot more fussy than others. So for most of our indoor plants, we pick the ones that are pretty easygoing.
Well, that's good. You've
but
got a
but they will
thriving
they
one
will
right
talk to
behind
you.
you.
Yeah, I've got
They will talk to you. Is that what you're saying?
they talk to you. The plants, they're communicating
Mm,
with how they're presenting themselves. There's a theory I was reading about recently that plants, especially food plants that our corn and our beans, they've domesticated us as much as we've domesticated them.
mm.
So plants are training us to take care of them and help them propagate. So really, it's a two-way relationship. And if if you take joy in that kind of paying attention to a plant, it's really fulfilling.
Hey, sometimes plants amaze me, where they gain a foothold,
Oh
out in the
yeah.
yard, there's constant, I've got so much yard work that I need to do as the spring approaches here, but it's amazing where plants have, gained traction, put their little roots in, where did
Yep.
these plants come from? I was on a nature hike the other day. It was about an 8-mile hike. And some of the plants that were there, you could tell, there weren't any others like that around
Mhm.
there. So where did that particular plant come from and how did it take hold? It's
Yeah.
fascinating, really.
Yeah. Caught a ride on a shoe or in a squirrel, or yeah, it's just fun. And especially like so many of the food plants, like a tomato. It is so easy to grow tomatoes. They want to be alive so bad.
Yeah, yeah.
If you just put it in the ground, keep it reasonably wet, it's going to be so happy and it'll make beautiful tomatoes.
And the ones at the store are so terrible. They're so tough and mealy. Yeah, they're not good at all.
See, that's the big problem with vegetable gardening in Canada, is that you get wonderful fresh produce for about 4 months, and then you have to go back to the grocery store for the rest of the year. It's
Oh, yeah, that's
nowhere
right.
near as good.
So what else do you do for fun up in Canada? What it's such a beautiful country with so
Mhm.
much to explore. What do you enjoy doing there?
Well, this time of year, I like snowshoeing.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so my partner, we've got a set of snowshoes, and it's really easy to just go to the local park. We live near one of the provincial parks, and so just kind of it's like walking at a higher difficulty setting for those who don't snowshoe. But it's a lot of fun, and it's nice to just be outside, especially when kind of by inclination you want to huddle inside for 6 months. So that's a nice winter activity. Um, Easier when there's not a pandemic on, of course, but still getting out a bit. And then otherwise, I really like doing ceramics. That's kind of fun. Cooking, baking, lots of home hobbies, especially these days.
Yeah, you said you like to make things that would otherwise be expensive if you went out and bought them at the store. Explain a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah, it's kind of a joke at the. So I'm a millennial, and like many millennials, I like to preserve food, take up homemade soap making, just kind of any of these skills that 100 years ago, 150 years ago would have been very critical to the sustaining of life,
Sure.
which today are not necessarily. But doing it's really interesting and really fun. So spending all of this time learning how to make your own pickles, growing the cucumbers, pickling them, pressure canning them. Uh, uh, I could go buy a jar of pickles for $2. But learning how to do it's really fascinating, and I feel like it kind of cements me in my place in history. Is like this is what my great grandmother would have done. That's really cool. This activity connects me to that history, and if the apocalypse happens, it'll be very handy. So just on the off chance.
Just on the off
May
chance.
as
That's right.
well know how.
It's so funny you say that. We are so spoiled, right? We've got everything sitting in our
Mhm.
freezer or in our cupboards. We don't have to skin the animals and dry the meat and can the vegetables. All that kind of stuff is gone. We're very much a
Yep.
grocery store focused society. So you're right. A lot of those skills have been lost.
We are, and it's a friend of mine has a farm outside of town, and every year we help dispatch and process the chickens that they rear,
Uh-huh.
and doing that, learning how to do that, and actually be a part of that process of turning a live bird into dinner. It was really educational, not an easy activity by any means, but like something I'm really glad I've learned how to do just to understand what the reality of that actually has been
Yeah.
very interesting.
I grew up in Wisconsin, and that's deer hunting, kind of a capital of that, I guess. And yeah, you'd see people with deers on the hoods or on the roofs of their cars. And, somehow it had to go from that into, dinner. And yeah, I
Yeah.
never saw how the meat or the sausage was made, so to speak. But
Yeah, and I think it's good to know.
yeah,
It just to have that awareness of this is the reality of what it means to feed yourself this way.
yeah. Well, on the show, we always like to bring work and personal life
Mhm,
together and talk about balance, passion, fulfillment. So obviously there are challenges being a business owner, right? And
mhm,
and managing the tasks that you have, growing your business, but you also want to have that thriving personal life. You want to be able
mhm.
to enjoy those vegetables you're growing out in the garden. So how do you do it? How do you find like balance? What keeps you going, gets you up in the morning?
Well, I think what gets me up in the morning is the nice thing about running your own business, which any of your listeners who do will I'm sure agree with, is being able to decide what kind of work it is that you're doing. So, I mean, I love the work that we do. I think it's interesting. I like the people that we work with. I like the team, but the overriding passion of my life is not business podcasts. It's creating them and helping create them for people is full of a bunch of different activities that are interesting and satisfying and challenging in different ways. And I think that's what really gets me going, is that there's going to be a variety of interesting things to do every single day. And also, something that I really do find like great passion is managing and working with a team,
Mm.
so that I get to do that with a team that we've built over the years. That it's fantastic, and I really enjoy getting to interact in that way with people. So kind of work wise, that's what gets me up.
I think that's great. And you mentioned that you're a co-founder
Mhm.
and that your partner came to you one day and said, "Let's go in business together." That can be challenging, right? When you haven't
Mhm.
done that before with somebody.
Yeah.
How have you built a relationship with a co-founder so that you each carve out your own space, but it can be fulfilling for both of you at the same time?
I think doing exactly what you just said is kind of carving out our own space. So one thing that was helpful at the outset is that we had been colleagues before, and we knew each other and we liked each other, but we weren't very close friends. We didn't have a lot of personal history and like you know emotional baggage that we were bringing to the business relationship.
Sure.
And it certainly wasn't always 100% easy, perfectly flowing all of the time. But over say the course of the first year, we really nailed down. These are the things I'm going to be in charge of. These are the things you're going to be in charge of. These are the things we get veto on. And we just kind of divided the decision making responsibility. Not 100% before the issues ever came up, but kind of as the issues came up and we realized this is something that we're going to need to deal with again in the future. Let's decide now how we're going to handle it. That was, I think, the most effective thing that we did from that standpoint.
No, that's good. It sounds like you took a very proactive approach before things, because problems happen, right? They
Of
eventually come
course,
up in
yeah,
some form or another. And if you've got a system in place to deal with those, it makes it a lot easier.
it is. Yeah, and so it kind of came down to after the first year where we sometimes the lock horns a little bit and say like, nope, I want to do it this way. I want to do it this way. We said no. Design creative content based decisions. That's my business partner's role. That's what she's great at. And for me, strategy, marketing, sales decisions. That's going to be on my desk. And so once we figured that out, it made things a lot easier.
I bet. I bet. Yeah. Well, before we wrap up here today, I'd love to give you just an opportunity to talk a little bit about more about your company,
Mhm.
One Stone Creative. Tell people where they can find that podcasting report so they can download that and take a look at that. And then anything else that you want to share in terms of social media links or whatnot. And we'll make sure to have all that in our extensive podcast show notes here.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, so if anyone listening would like to get a copy of the State of Business Podcasting 2020 report, it is at onestonecreative.net/report. You can see all of the infographics that are the summary of the data that we collected. And if you'd like to opt in for the extended report, I've got an analysis action steps, and some other resources based on that research that are available there for free. And if you're interested in podcasting at all, pod curious, by all means, reach out. There's plenty of contact forms on the site.
Hey, that's great. I think what you're doing is perfect, especially for this time, because I think we're going to see an explosion in more podcasts, especially as these other platforms raise the visibility of them.
Yep.
Services like Clubhouse, I think, are only going to do more to sort of get people interested in hearing more content from some of these creators. So I think you're in a great space right now. And I really appreciate you taking a few minutes today just to talk about work life and how you balance the two. So thank you so much, Megan. I really appreciated your time today.
I think it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you again.